On my birthday, my brother announced, "I'm taking your car." Mom and Dad already okayed it. When I said no, Dad barked, "Then hand over the house keys, too." I only nodded. The next morning, they walked out to a bare driveway, and a "for sale" sign on the lawn. Imagine pouring your entire life savings, every ounce of your hard work, into building something that is finally, truly yours. Now, picture your own family, the people who are supposed to love and protect you, breaking into your home, rifling through your most private documents, and then demanding you sign it all away to your entitled brother. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Well, that was my reality, and it was the moment I stopped being the selfish son they always called me and started plotting the most satisfying revenge of my life. What the hell happened next? You're about to find out. My name's Callum, I'm 27, and honestly, I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. For most of my life, I tried to be the easygoing kid. You know, the one who didn't cause trouble, who kept the peace at family dinners, who just brushed off all the little digs and the blatant favoritism that always seemed to tilt toward my younger brother, Ryan. He was the golden child, plain and simple. If he wanted something, he usually got it, no questions asked. And if I wanted something, well, I was told to be patient, to wait my turn, to not be selfish. You'd think that once you're an adult, that messed up dynamic would just fade away. But in my family, it only got worse. The real tipping point, the setup for all of this, happened a few months back on my birthday. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, a low-key celebration. Cake, a few relatives, nothing big. I was actually really looking forward to it because after years of saving every single penny, working double shifts until I was completely wiped out, and living way under my means, I had finally bought my own car and moved into a small house not far from the city. That house. That car. They weren't just things. They represented years of me saying no to vacations, saying no to nights out, saying no to every single temptation that would drain my money. They were mine, fully in my name, and I was so incredibly proud of that. But my pride, well, it wasn't exactly shared in my household. Ryan, who was 23 at the time, had a completely different approach to life. He just floated from one thing to another. College courses he never finished, jobs he quit after a few months. Hobbies he dropped as soon as they got even a little bit difficult. Every single time he crashed into a dead end, Mom and Dad bailed him out. When he blew through money, they covered his rent. When he wrecked his second-hand car in some weekend joyride, they dipped into their savings to get him another one. I kept telling myself it wasn't my problem. That it wasn't my burden to carry. Until the day it suddenly, terrifyingly, became mine. That birthday night, Ryan showed up late, wearing that smug grin he always had when he was about to make some grand announcement. Everyone had just finished singing happy birthday when he clinked his glass and said, "By the way, I'm taking Callum's car." My stomach dropped. Mom and Dad already agreed. The room went dead silent, then burst into this awkward, half-hearted laugh from my relatives, like they weren't sure if he was joking. But Ryan wasn't the type to joke about things he wanted. He had this look in his eyes, daring me to challenge him. I remember setting my fork down, staring at him, thinking maybe I'd misheard. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm taking your car," he repeated, more casually this time, like it was already settled. "You've had it long enough, and I need something reliable." Mom and Dad said it's only fair. Fair? My voice cracked, betraying the anger bubbling inside me. "I bought that car with my money, Ryan. You don't just get to," Dad cut me off. "Callum, don't start. Your brother needs the car more than you. You can manage without it. You've got the house, after all." That stung more than I care to admit. They said it so matter-of-factly. Like my hard work didn't matter. Like Ryan's needs were automatically inherently, more important than mine. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe they'd hear how insane it sounded if I threw it back at them. So, because I worked my tail off to buy something, you think he should just get it handed to him? That's what you're saying. Mom just gave me that look. The same one she'd been giving me since I was a kid whenever I dared to question her decisions. Stop being dramatic, Callum. Family shares. But what really, truly cut deep was what came next. Ryan leaned back in his chair, all smug satisfaction, and said, "If you don't want to hand over the keys, then maybe Dad's right. You should give us the house keys, too. You don't deserve all this space to yourself." I felt my stomach twist, a cold dread spreading through me, but I kept my face neutral. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly, pushed my chair back, and said, "All right." The table went silent again, but not because they realized how wrong they were. More because they thought I'd finally given in. In their eyes, I had just accepted my role as the one who sacrifices, the one who bends. What they didn't know was that something inside me had fundamentally shifted. That night, lying awake in my own bed, I thought about every single time I'd been told to let Ryan have the bigger slice, the better toy, the easier path. Every time I'd been told to be grateful while he got rewarded for doing absolutely nothing. And for the first time, instead of swallowing the bitterness, I let it grow. I let myself plan. And when morning came, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next few weeks after my birthday felt like living in a pressure cooker. On the surface, things were normal. Family dinners, phone calls from Mom, Ryan dropping by unannounced. But underneath, there was this constant, suffocating hum of entitlement buzzing in the air. They had taken my silence at the table as a green light, as if me nodding and walking away meant I had accepted their terms. And the more they thought they had me, the bolder, the more brazen they became. Ryan started borrowing the car without even asking. The first time I walked outside on a Saturday morning to find the driveway empty, no text, no note. I called him, and he answered like nothing was wrong. "Relax, Callum. I'll bring it back later." "You weren't using it." He hung up before I could say another word. That became a pattern. He'd grab the car, leave it low on gas, sometimes littered with fast food wrappers, and then look at me like I was uptight for even mentioning it. When I brought it up to Mom and Dad, desperately hoping they'd finally see how ridiculous it was, they just brushed it off. "He's your brother," Mom said in that clipped, matter-of-fact way she always used when she wanted to shut down a conversation. "Stop being so possessive. You've always been selfish with your things." Selfish. That word burned. I had spent years scrimping and saving, working jobs that left me absolutely exhausted, just to build a life of my own. Meanwhile, Ryan coasted, and somehow I was the selfish one for not letting him reap the benefits of my work. It didn't stop with the car. One evening, I came home from work to find Ryan lounging in my living room with his shoes on the coffee table, scrolling through my streaming accounts like he owned the place. "Mom gave me the spare key," he said with a shrug when I asked how he got in. "She said I should have access, since we're family." That night, I lay awake replaying those words. Mom gave me the spare key. She hadn't asked me. She hadn't even told me. She just decided. Like my house wasn't mine, but some family-owned timeshare that Ryan could stroll into whenever he pleased. From then on, Ryan started treating my place like his second home. He'd crash on the couch without warning, raid my fridge, even invite his friends over once while I was at work. I walked in to find 3 strangers drinking beers in my kitchen, laughing like they owned the place. Ryan clapped me on the back and said, "Don't worry, bro." I told them, "It's cool. You've got the space." I didn't argue. I didn't explode. I just smiled tightly, went to my room, and shut the door. But inside, my thoughts were boiling. Every new violation, every dismissal from my parents, Every smug smirk from Ryan added another brick to the wall I was building inside myself. A wall that separated me from the version of me who had always given in. The manipulation from my parents grew subtler, but sharper. They'd drop little comments whenever I pushed back. "You've changed, Callum," Mom would say, her voice heavy with disappointment, like I was breaking her heart. "You used to be so considerate." Or Dad, shaking his head with that practiced look of fatherly disapproval. "You're making family life harder than it needs to be. We all need to support each other." But support always meant me giving and Ryan taking. And if I dared to resist, I was painted as the problem. The moment that really drove the knife in happened on a Sunday dinner. We were all at my parents' house, and Ryan complained loudly that I never let him properly use the car for trips out of town. "It's like he thinks he owns it or something," Ryan joked, smirking as everyone chuckled. Dad set his fork down and said, "Actually, Ryan has a point. If you're not willing to share, Callum, maybe it's time you handed the car over to someone who will use it responsibly." I felt the air leave my chest. Responsibly. Ryan had already racked up parking tickets, dented 2 of his own cars, and nearly lost his license. And yet, here was Dad, looking me in the eye and calling me irresponsible because I wanted to keep the car I had worked for. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just chewed my food slowly, nodded once, and let them all think they'd won. But inside, something snapped. That was the night I realized there was no reasoning with them. No convincing them to see me as anything other than the family doormat. If I wanted to protect what was mine, I couldn't wait for them to come to their senses. I had to play by their rules, the unspoken rules, where power belonged to whoever took it first. And from that night forward, I started planning. It was about 3 weeks after that Sunday dinner when the ultimate betrayal happened. The kind of betrayal that even now makes my chest tighten when I think about it. Up until that point, the mistreatment had been steady, almost predictable. Ryan helping himself to my car, dropping by uninvited, my parents backing him up no matter what. I had been swallowing it, tucking my anger away in neat little boxes, telling myself I'd bide my time. But then they crossed a line I didn't even realize they were willing to cross. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was dead tired after a long day at work. I pulled into the driveway, already picturing myself collapsing on the couch, maybe ordering takeout. But as I got closer, something felt off. The porch light was on, and there were voices inside. Voices that didn't belong. My stomach sank. I unlocked the door and walked in to find Ryan, Mom, and Dad sitting in my living room. Spread out on the coffee table were papers. My papers. I froze in the doorway, and Ryan looked up with that infuriating grin. "Oh, hey, you're home. We were just talking about the house." "The house? My house? What are you doing with my things?" I asked, my voice tight, barely controlled. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be so defensive, Callum. We're just trying to help you manage. We've been looking over your documents, and it's clear you can't handle all this on your own. It's too much responsibility." I stepped closer and realized what they were looking at. The deed. My mortgage papers. Even bank statements I kept in a locked drawer in my desk. My heart started pounding because that drawer had been locked, and I hadn't given anyone the key. "Where did you get these?" I asked, my voice sharper now, a dangerous edge creeping in. Ryan leaned back like he was king of the castle. "You really should hide your keys better, bro. Mom found the spare, and we figured it was time to step in before you mess things up." My blood ran cold. "You broke into my room." Dad didn't even flinch. "Don't make this bigger than it is. We're your parents. We have a right to be involved in these decisions. And frankly, you've been selfish keeping this house all to yourself while your brother struggles. We think the better option is to sign the house into all of our names. That way, it benefits the family. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so unreal, so utterly insane, I couldn't process it any other way. You want me to what? Hand over my house to you after I worked for years to afford it? Ryan shrugged like it was obvious. You've had your chance. You don't even use half the rooms. I could move in here with my friends and we'd actually enjoy it, and you'd still have a roof over your head. You're just being greedy. Greedy. That word hit harder than selfish ever had. Greedy for wanting to keep what I had poured my youth, my sanity, my savings into. Greedy for not letting my reckless brother and enabling parents strip me of the only stability I had. I remember standing there, my fists clenched at my sides, every instinct screaming at me to throw them out of my house that second. But I didn't. I swallowed hard, forced my voice to stay calm, and said, "You need to leave now." Mom narrowed her eyes like I was a misbehaving child. "Don't talk to us like that. Callum. We're trying to do what's best for you." Dad added, "And if you keep resisting, don't be surprised if we take steps ourselves. Family comes first." They left eventually, but not before Ryan scooped up one of the papers, my bank statement, and folded it into his pocket like it was his by right. That night, I sat in the dark living room long after they'd gone, staring at the empty space where my documents had been. I felt violated, not just because they'd broken into my private things, but because they had shown their hand. They didn't just want to leech off me anymore. They wanted control. And in that moment, the last piece of my old self, the son who tried to please, the brother who stayed quiet, burned away. They had made it clear they saw me as nothing more than a resource to be drained. That was the night I promised myself they would regret underestimating me. The days after that invasion were some of the darkest I can remember. It wasn't just the violation of privacy. It was the gut-wrenching realization that my own family, the people who were supposed to protect me, had decided I was nothing more than a bank account and a deed with legs. For a while, I felt paralyzed. I'd go to work, come home, and sit in the quiet of my house, half expecting to walk in and find them there again, rummaging through my life. I started double-checking the locks every night, then triple-checking. I slept lighter, waking at every noise, my chest tight with the fear that Ryan or my parents might show up in the middle of the night. It didn't take long for their pressure campaign to really kick into high gear. Ryan began texting me daily, sometimes multiple times a day, about when he could move into his room. He wasn't asking, he was announcing casually, like it was already decided. "Hey, bro, thinking I'll take the upstairs bedroom. Better light for streaming. Or, need to bring some boxes by this weekend. Don't worry, I'll only use the garage for a bit." At first, I ignored him, hoping he'd get bored and move on. But ignoring only made him escalate. Soon, he was calling me at work, leaving voicemails about how I was dragging this out and how Mom and Dad were on his side. And they were. Mom called one evening with her voice laced in that sugary guilt-trip tone I knew too well. "Callum, honey, you've always been the responsible one. You know your brother needs stability. Why are you making this so difficult? We're only asking you to do what's right." When I told her I wasn't comfortable with Ryan moving in, she sighed deeply, like I'd disappointed her in the worst possible way. "I can't believe how selfish you've become. Your father and I raised you better than this." That word again. Selfish. Dad was more blunt. When I went over for Sunday dinner, he pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You're being stubborn, Callum. Family property should benefit everyone, not just you. If you don't start cooperating, don't be surprised if Ryan takes matters into his own hands." It was a threat, thinly veiled, but clear enough. And sure enough, the following week, I came home from work to find Ryan's old futon sitting in my garage, along with 3 boxes of his clothes. He had a key now, one I hadn't given him, and he didn't even try to hide it. When I confronted him, he smirked. "Mom said I could. Besides, you've got plenty of space. Stop acting like it's a big deal. That night was my rock bottom. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the wall, the crushing weight of it all pressing down on me. It felt like no matter what I did, they would find a way to push further, to twist the knife deeper. I couldn't go to the police. On paper, Ryan was family with a key, and they'd probably laugh me out of the station. And if I changed the locks, I knew my parents would show up with their endless lectures, their guilt trips, their threats of cutting me out entirely. But somewhere in that darkness, a quiet thought flickered. If they wanted to play this game, fine, I'd play. I realized fighting them head-on was pointless. They thrived on confrontation, on guilt, on making me look like the unreasonable one. But what they didn't realize was that I had been listening, observing, taking notes my whole life. I knew their patterns, their weaknesses. So instead of yelling, I started smiling. When Ryan dumped his things in my garage, I told him it was fine. When Mom scolded me for being selfish, I nodded and said I'd think about it. When Dad threatened me, I kept my voice even, almost apologetic. I let them believe they were winning, that I was retreating into the role they had assigned me. Inside, though, I was planning. I started small. I pulled my most important documents, the deed, the mortgage papers, my banking info, and moved them to a safety deposit box at the bank. I tightened up my finances, rerouting my paychecks, and shutting down the joint savings account my parents had once insisted I keep open for emergencies. I even started discreetly meeting with a lawyer friend from college, asking vague questions about property law, about how to protect assets from family disputes. No one knew. Not Ryan. Not Mom. Not Dad. On the outside, I was the same quiet, sighing and going along with their pressure. But in my head, I was drawing the outlines of something bigger, something they wouldn't see coming until it was far, far too late. And the funny thing is, their constant mistreatment only gave me more fuel. Every cutting remark, every smug grin from Ryan, every guilt-laden phone call from Mom hardened my resolve. I knew I couldn't stay in the stalemate forever. The day would come when they pushed too far. And when it did, I would be ready. I didn't know it at the time, but that day was coming sooner than I expected. The months that followed were some of the strangest of my life. On the outside, if you had looked in, you'd have seen the same old dynamic. Ryan swaggering around, my parents playing favorites, me nodding along and not putting up much of a fight. To them, I was beaten down, slipping back into the old role of the quiet, compliant son. But beneath that mask, things were shifting slowly, steadily, in ways they couldn't possibly see. It started with my job. I had been grinding away at the same company for years, always reliable, always showing up early and leaving late, but never really noticed. That changed when a manager suddenly quit, and my supervisor tapped me to take over some of their responsibilities temporarily. I saw my opening and poured myself into the role. Within 3 months, I wasn't just doing it temporarily. I was officially promoted. My salary jumped, and with it came a new level of stability. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I could finally breathe. I started upgrading little things, better suits for work, healthier groceries, a gym membership. And I could see the difference it made, not just in how others treated me, but in how I carried myself. For so long, I had let my family's opinion of me weigh me down. But at work, I was respected, valued. That feeling was like fuel. Meanwhile, Ryan was spiraling in the opposite direction. He had tried to move into my house, but since I quietly moved his futon and boxes into a storage unit and claimed it was just temporary until I had space, he never got a foothold. His job prospects kept crumbling. He'd land something decent, then quit within weeks because it was too boring or beneath him. He'd call me sometimes, fishing for help, but I always kept my responses vague and non-committal. I'll see what I can do. Maybe later. He didn't realize that by stringing him along, I was keeping him off balance, always thinking he was close to winning me over, never realizing I was pulling further and further away. I also began expanding my social circle. For years, my parents had painted me as the loner, the one who wouldn't survive without family. But I started reconnecting with old college friends, networking at work events, even joining a local community group. Slowly, I built relationships outside the family shadow. These people saw me for who I was, not through the warped lens of favoritism and manipulation, and their respect gave me a confidence I hadn't realized I was missing. Financially, I became more careful and more strategic. Every bonus, every bit of overtime went straight into savings or investments. I met with my lawyer friend more seriously this time, setting up protective measures around my house and assets. Quietly, I prepared for the very real possibility that my parents or Ryan might try something drastic. And as my life grew stronger, their control over me grew weaker. The shift was subtle at first. I'd show up to Sunday dinners looking sharper, speaking with more authority, and I could see it in their eyes. They noticed. Ryan would make his usual snide remarks about me, acting fancy, but they didn't land the same way anymore. Mom's guilt trip seemed to just roll off me. Dad's stern lectures started sounding hollow, without any real power. The moment I truly realized I was changing was one night when Ryan showed up drunk at my place, pounding on the door at 2 a.m., demanding to be let in. Old me would have opened the door. Tried to calm him down, maybe even let him crash on the couch just to avoid conflict. But this time, I didn't. I stood at the window, watching him stumble and curse. And then I simply called a cab for him and shut the blinds. By morning, when he texted me furious messages, I didn't even reply. It wasn't just about ignoring him. It was about reclaiming control. Each time I chose not to bend, not to give in, I felt stronger. But of course, my parents didn't take kindly to the change. They doubled down. More calls, more guilt, more comments about how I was forgetting where I came from. They were losing their grip, and they knew it. And when people like that feel their power slipping, they don't go quietly. That's what set the stage for what came next. The moment when they tried to force their hand in a way that would have destroyed me if I hadn't been ready. And that's when everything I had been building in secret finally came into play. It was late spring when the opportunity finally revealed itself. Though at first it didn't look like an opportunity at all. It looked like yet another brazen attempt by my parents and Ryan to tighten their suffocating grip. I had stopped by my parents' house one evening, more out of habit and lingering obligation than anything else. By then, I was showing up less and less. Work, friends, and my own flourishing life kept me busy, but I still felt that faint tug. When I walked into the living room, I saw Ryan leaning against the mantel, smirking like he had just won a game no one else knew they were playing. On the coffee table was a thick folder. Dad gestured for me to sit. "We've been talking, Callum, about the house." My stomach tightened, a familiar knot of dread, but I kept my face calm. "What about it?" Mom folded her hands, a sweet, saccharine smile pasted on her face, like she was delivering wonderful news. "We think it makes sense for you to sign it over into a family trust. That way, it belongs to all of us equally. It's safer that way." I raised an eyebrow. "Safer for who?" Ryan chimed in, grinning ear to ear, his words dripping with pure entitlement. "For me, obviously. You've been hogging that house long enough. This way, I get my share, and you don't have to worry about handling everything. Win-win." They slid the folder toward me, and I flipped it open. Sure enough, it was paperwork, half-baked legal forms they must have downloaded off the internet, already filled out with my address and my name penciled in as grantor. The plan was chillingly simple. I'd sign, and suddenly my house wouldn't just be mine anymore. It would belong to all of us. I closed the folder slowly and looked at each of them in turn. Old me would have panicked, maybe argued, maybe stormed out in a fit of rage. But this version of me, stronger, calmer, sharper, just smiled faintly. "I'll think about it," I said. That answer seemed to satisfy them for the moment. But later that night, as I sat in my own living room, the image of that folder still burning in my memory, I realized something incredibly important. They weren't just trying to bully me anymore. They were desperate. Desperate enough to put things in writing. Desperate enough to leave a paper trail. And desperate people make mistakes. I decided then to stop simply playing defense and start setting up my own board. First, I brought the folder to my lawyer friend. He flipped through it, chuckling. "These aren't even legally binding. They tried to copy a trust agreement, but it's laughably incomplete. If anything, it's evidence." Evidence. That word stuck in my head. I hadn't thought of documenting things before. But from then on, I started keeping meticulous records, texts, voicemails, even subtle recordings of conversations. Ryan's late-night demands, Mom's guilt trips, Dad's threats, they all started piling up into a neat, undeniable archive. Second, I began looking into my house itself. I learned something I hadn't known before. Because of how I'd structured the mortgage, and especially after my promotion, I had far more leverage than I'd realized. I was sitting on equity, serious equity, that I could use if I needed to. With the market heating up, the value of my home was rising faster than I could have imagined. That's when the idea began to form. What if I used the very thing they were trying to take from me as the weapon to turn it all around? Meanwhile, my personal life kept improving. My promotion led to bigger projects, more recognition, and eventually an offer from another firm trying to lure me away. I suddenly had bargaining power I'd never had before. For the first time, I wasn't just secure. I was in demand. That financial and professional cushion gave me immense freedom. If I wanted to, I could walk away from my family entirely, cut the cord completely. But I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted them to feel it. The more they pushed, the more leverage I quietly stacked. Ryan's texts grew nastier. "If you don't let me move in by summer, I'll just show up with my stuff." Mom left me voicemails about how I was breaking the family apart. Dad accused me of acting like a stranger. I didn't delete any of it. I saved every word. And then came the tipping point. One afternoon, Ryan let slip something that tied everything together. He'd been bragging to one of his friends on speakerphone while I was nearby, not realizing I could hear him. "Don't worry, man. I'll have the house soon. Dad says Callum's on the ropes. It's only a matter of time. Once it's in my name, you can crash there anytime." "In your name?" I asked from the doorway, my voice low, cutting through his bragging. Ryan froze, then recovered with a smirk. "Yeah, what? You thought it was going to stay yours forever. You'll see. Just a matter of time." That was it. That was the moment I knew exactly what I had to do. I won't give it all away yet, but let's just say the same house they thought they could steal out from under me was about to become the stage for a very, very different ending. When the moment came, it wasn't with fireworks or shouting or me storming into a room demanding justice. That would have given them too much satisfaction, an emotional outburst they could twist back on me, painting me as unstable or dramatic. No. When my revenge finally unfolded, it was with a calm so quiet, so absolute, it scared even me. By early summer, the tension between us had reached a breaking point. Ryan had all but declared the house his, bragging to friends about where his new room would be. Mom was pressuring me daily with guilt trips about family loyalty. Dad had started using sharper language, warning me that if I didn't comply, I'd regret making things difficult. And through it all, I smiled. I nodded. And I let them believe they were cornering me. What they didn't know was that weeks earlier, I'd met with a realtor. The housing market was climbing fast, and my little house, modest as it was, had appreciated to nearly double what I'd paid for it. The equity was enough to change my life. And with my career on an upward trajectory, I knew this was my moment. So, quietly, I listed the house. No family knew, no friends slipped the secret. Within days, I had multiple offers. And within weeks, I had a buyer. Cash. Fast close. The final papers were signed on a Thursday afternoon. The ink was barely dry when I drove home, parked my car in the driveway, and hammered a large "For Sale" sign into the yard. That evening, I didn't answer calls. I didn't text anyone back. I simply went about my night as if nothing had happened. The real performance came the next morning. At exactly 9 a.m., I heard the familiar sound of Ryan's car pulling up, tires crunching on gravel, a car door slamming, and then his voice, loud, entitled, already annoyed. He'd come to collect his room. He marched up the driveway, his phone out like he was live-streaming a victory. But when he reached the top of the drive and saw the bright red "For Sale" sign planted in the yard, his steps faltered. "What the," he muttered. He spun to face the house, then back to the sign, like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. "What is this?" I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, calm as can be. "Oh, that? The house is sold. Papers signed yesterday." His jaw dropped. You can't do that. This is our house." Mom said. Dad said. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "No, Ryan. This was always my house, and now it's not even that. It belongs to someone else, completely out of reach." That was when Mom and Dad pulled into the driveway behind him. Their expressions a mix of confusion and triumph until they saw the sign. Mom's face went utterly pale. Dad's mouth actually opened and closed like a fish, no words coming out. Ryan turned on me, sputtering. "You can't just sell it without telling us." I cut him off. My voice steady, unwavering. "Actually, I can. It was never in your name. Never in theirs. All those times you told me I was selfish, greedy, turns out those words don't mean much when you don't have a single legal claim." For once, Ryan had no comeback. Mom's voice finally cracked through the stunned silence. "Callum, how could you? This was supposed to be, what? Yours?" I asked, tilting my head. Funny, because as far as I remember, I was the one who worked for it. I was the one who paid every bill, every mortgage payment. And you? You treated me like an ATM with a spare bedroom. So, no, you don't get to be shocked that I made a decision without your blessing." They all stood there, stunned. The reality was hitting them harder with every passing second. The house they'd staked their entitlement on was gone. Not theirs to invade. Not theirs to manipulate me over. Gone. Ryan's face twisted with rage, but underneath, I saw fear. Fear of losing the leverage he thought he had. Mom tried one last time, her voice trembling. "You've broken this family." I smiled faintly. "No, you broke it years ago. I just stopped pretending to hold the pieces together." With that, I turned and walked back inside, leaving them standing in the driveway, staring at the sign like it was a headstone. The silence in that driveway didn't last long. The moment I closed the door, I heard muffled shouting. Ryan yelling at Mom and Dad. Mom trying to calm him down. Dad insisting they could fix this. For years, I had been the one absorbing their chaos, their disappointment, their endless demands. This time, I let it wash over me from the safety of my living room, a barrier of walls and locked doors between us. The next few days were a storm of phone calls, texts, and visits. I didn't answer. Ryan sent dozens of angry messages. "You betrayed us. You can't just sell the house like that. You'll regret this. Mom's calls were layered with guilt, as if carefully rehearsed. Callum, families don't do this to each other. Dad's messages were sharper. This isn't over. But legally, it was. The new owners closed within the week. By the time my family realized there was no loophole, no way to undo it, the money was already sitting safely in my account, untouchable. I had secured a new place across town, a condo that was smaller, but mine alone, hidden from their reach. The locks, the keys, the deed, all under my control. The real fallout came the following Sunday. Against my better judgment, I went to dinner at their house one last time. I walked into a scene of quiet devastation. Ryan was sulking at the table, arms crossed, face twisted in anger. Mom's eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Dad sat stiffly, jaw clenched, a man who wasn't used to losing control. Ryan was the first to speak. You ruined everything. I told my friends. I was moving in. Do you have any idea how stupid you made me look? I didn't flinch. Maybe you shouldn't count on things that don't belong to you. Mom reached across the table, her voice shaking. Callum, we just wanted to feel included. You didn't have to shut us out like this. I leaned back, calm, collected. No, you didn't want to be included. You wanted to take. Every step of the way, you called me selfish while draining me dry. And when I finally stood up for myself, you acted like I betrayed you. That's not family. That's control. Dad's voice was low, dangerous. You've turned your back on us. I met his gaze steadily. No, you turned your back on me. The moment you decided Ryan's wants mattered more than my hard work, I just stopped pretending not to notice. The table went silent for once. There were no comebacks, no guilt trips that could pierce through. They were cornered, not by my words, but by their own actions, the years of favoritism, the entitlement, the arrogance. All of it had led here. I stood, placing my napkin neatly on the table. This is the last dinner I'll come to. I wish you well, but I'm done playing the role you wrote for me. Ryan scoffed. You think you're better than us now? I looked at him one last time, not with anger, but with clarity. No, Ryan. I just finally realized I don't have to be less than myself to make you comfortable. Then I walked out. Weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ryan had been forced to move back in with my parents after defaulting on yet another lease. My parents' finances weren't strong enough to keep bailing him out, and the tension in their house had only grown. The house they thought they could claim from me was gone, and with it went the illusion that they could control me forever. As for me, I settled into my new condo, surrounded by quiet and freedom. I built routines that were mine alone. Late-night reading without interruptions, weekends with coffee on the balcony, evenings spent with friends who respected me for who I was. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time, that was enough. The finality of it all hit me one morning when I looked out over the city from my balcony. The skyline stretched wide and open, and I realized I wasn't looking back anymore. The house, the family battles, the years of swallowing their mistreatment. It was all behind me. And in that stillness, one thought rose above all others: sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's walking away with your head high, your life in your own hands, and leaving those who tried to control you standing in the wreckage of their own entitlement. That was the last time I ever let them mistake me for someone they could just take from. Have you ever had to choose yourself over the expectations of your family? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.